Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about QuickBooks Self-Employed, which is actually one of the versions of QuickBooks Online. It is the lowest cost version, and it's really designed for people in business that do not have corporations, people that are going to file their business activities inside of their personal tax return. If in contrast, you actually have an LLC or a corporation and you want to do accounting, you should strongly consider working with QuickBooks Simple Start, QuickBooks Essentials, or QuickBooks Plus. So if that's what you're looking for, I'm going to put a link on the bottom so you can know exactly what's the process to set that up and the link in which you should go to set up a free trial. However, for this particular video, we're 100% focused on QuickBooks Self-Employed, which again is for the folks that are in business that are not formally incorporated, and they don't need to have full business type of accounting. All right, so let's get started. We're going to go to www. That's going to forward you to an affiliate link that I have that is going to give you 50% discount during the first year. That takes it from $10 a month to $5 a month for 12 months. But you don't have to put a credit card. You can just get started with a free trial. So we're going to go ahead and click on where it says try it free. I'm going to click on pricing real quick just to kind of show you. And they're going to give you two options, the one that's bundled with TurboTax and the one that's QuickBooks by itself. You can choose that if you're going to do your own tax returns. That's really up to you. But let's just get started with a free trial. If you already have an Intuit account, you would click sign in. If you don't have one, just create one on the fly. By putting your email, phone number, password, click on remember me, and then sign up. It won't ask you for a credit card. You're going to have a full 30 days of free trial. The very first thing that QuickBooks will ask you to do, and this is QuickBooks Self-Employed. It will ask you to connect your bank account. I'm going to skip that for now because I want to give you a quick tour of what the software is like so you can get acquainted with it before we start connecting the bank. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that little X, and then I'm going to show you what the screen looks like. So on the top left, you're going to see the QuickBooks logo with the word self-employed next to it, letting you know that you are in fact working on QuickBooks Self-Employed, not QuickBooks Online. You're going to see the subscribe now button, right, that you can click on and put your credit card number. It basically lets you know how many days left you have in your free trial. It will remember that there's going to be that 50% discount because you used that link that I talked about at the beginning of the video. On the left navigation bar, you're going to see a home button that's going to take you to the very screen that you're looking at. You're going to see a transactions button that is going to show you the history of the transactions that were downloaded from the bank. We're going to see a miles button that allows you to enter or load the miles from your vehicle. We're going to see the taxes button that allows you to make quarterly estimated taxes based on your business income. Because you don't have payroll per se because you're self-employed, you have to make quarterly payments, and QuickBooks Self-Employed will make that calculation for you based on the assumption that all your income is your self-employed income. You should probably consider talking to an accounting professional about taxes anyway, but that's actually a really nice feature to have. Then we're going to see the reports button that's going to give you a profit and loss and a tax summary, which is pretty much what most people need. And then a new invoices button that allows you to create invoices and actually connect a merchant account so people can pay you online with a credit card. Now on the right side of the screen, we're going to see estimated taxes due. This actually lets you know, based on the income that you have during the year, how much estimated taxes QuickBooks Self-Employed is assuming that you have to pay. And it calculates that number for you. It also lets you know when you have to pay it. There's also a tax checklist, which is pretty awesome. That pretty much gives you a checklist of all the things that you should be entering or not forget to be doing before you're actually making tax payments. Because if you don't put a vehicle that has depreciation, if you don't put expenses that maybe didn't come through the bank, if you don't put your mileage, all these things could affect your estimated taxes. So they're actually taking you through a checklist to make sure that QuickBooks Self-Employed has as much information as possible in order to make that estimate for you. Again, I strongly recommend that you work with an accounting professional when it comes to tax. The thing is that QuickBooks Self-Employed is a product that's pushed to self-employed individuals that are not necessarily working with tax professionals, and they also try to sell you the TurboTax software so you can prepare your own taxes. Now, I don't see any issues with that. If you have the capacity to do your own taxes, save the money, don't pay the accountant. But if your situation gets a little bit complicated, get an accountant involved. Anyway, so there's also the gear button on the top right, which has my name on it. And that's going to take you to other areas inside of the software. We're going to see the bank accounts button. That's going to take you to a place where you can configure your bank accounts. And we're going to get back into that. We're going to see the imports button that allows you to manually import transactions that maybe you downloaded from the bank on your own in an Excel or CSV file, that sort of thing. There's also a rules button that allows you to create rules here on the right side of the screen, and we'll get to that. Allows you to create rules about how QuickBooks Self-Employed should be behaving when they see those expenditures coming in from the bank. Then we're going to see the receipt forwarding button. That one actually pretty much gives you instructions. If you send an email to receipts@quickbooks.com from your original email address, anything that was sent to you via email that you forward, basically, it comes into QuickBooks Self-Employed as a receipt. That's a really awesome feature. Then you're also going to see tax profile. And this is where you're going to set up all the information about you personally in order for QuickBooks to attempt to make that, again, that estimated tax projection. And you can do it for a couple of years going back as well, which is pretty cool. And it also includes, for 2018, all of the new tax laws as well. So you'll be up to date on that. Then there's also vehicle info, and that allows you to put information about your vehicle so you can start tracking your miles. You're also going to see healthcare, which is a place where you give it information about what kind of health insurance you have. If you have an HSA account, which is something related to taxes, you can actually put money on an HSA account to be used for health, and there is potential deductibility there. And it will also take you to the healthcare.gov website, to encourage you to get health insurance, I guess. I'm not sure, how long that's going to be there for, but that's there. And I'm thinking that this healthcare page is kind of dynamic. So maybe by the time you watch this video, it won't be the same. So we'll see. There's also the profile button where it says about you, where you're basically going to put your personal information, your name, your address, your email address. You can change your password, put your phone number, all that good stuff. We can go to the next one that says accountant, and this is where you get to invite your accountant to collaborate with you. So I'm going to invite my accountant into collaborating with me in QuickBooks Online Self-Employed. You click on send invitation. Your accountant will get an email asking them to have access into your QuickBooks Online Self-Employed. So at the end of the year, tax time, whatever, they can log in and they can look at the information that you've entered. And then finally, there's a button that says cancel trial, which is self-explanatory, and then sign out. So that's pretty much what QuickBooks Self-Employed looks like in a nutshell. Now, if you're setting up QuickBooks Self-Employed for the first time, the first thing you want to do is connect your bank. I mean, I know it sounds like a way too obvious, but that's really where the bulk of the information that comes in is from the bank. Now, not every bank is going to connect directly with QuickBooks Online Self-Employed. Some of the bigger banks do it automatically. Some of the smaller banks, you're going to have to go through the imports feature to be able to bring in the information. But I'm going to go ahead and connect my bank to see what that looks like. So I'm going to click on transactions. I'm going to click on where it says add first account. I'm going to select my bank. I'm going to put my credentials. So you select the bank account and credit cards you would like to link. So QuickBooks Self-Employed starts downloading all the information straight into the system. So you can start selecting the categories. You hit continue. QuickBooks Online Self-Employed is going to try to guess some of the categories of the expenditures and the income coming in. You're going to have full control over choosing what these things are going to look like. But it is going to attempt to give you some categories of the information that comes in. So it's going to be different for every person, but it's great to kind of see exactly what QuickBooks does with it. Because Intuit, the makers of QuickBooks, they're getting better and better with artificial intelligence at categorizing these things for you. Then once it's done, it's going to give you some sort of potential deductions. I mean, none of this information is really useful. This is just kind of a quick teaser about the information that was just downloaded. We can click on view results. And then at first it will ask you about some of the expenditures that it sees on the account. And you can choose, whether or not it is a business expense or not. And you can basically just click on the slider. Yes, this is business. This is not business. That sort of thing. You can hit save and continue. All right, so obviously every single bank download into QuickBooks Self-Employed is going to look different. The way the bank labels the transactions, the way your particular business activities come in, everything is going to be distinctively different. So what you need to do is you need to make sure to have your bank statements maybe in a different screen, or your bank activity, so you can look at it through the bank as well, to make sure that what you're looking at is complete, because in many cases the information that comes in here is not 100% complete. So let's just go with it. So on the first transaction that I see here, I'm going to zoom in by clicking on Control Plus so we can see a little bit better. So the first transaction we see on 3/19/2018, we see a transaction from Intuit. That's basically software that I purchased. And then there's the amount, $64.09. So you got a couple of choices here. One, you can mark it a business, you can mark it personal, or you can split it. So in this case, I want to mark it business because this happens to be a business related expense. The minute I mark it business, QuickBooks Self-Employed is going to automatically give it a category. Now, this is based on the higher wisdom of the software and many self-employed individuals categorizing transactions, and they're giving you best guess. Now, you don't have to take this particular one. You can actually change it if you want to. But I'm going to go ahead and accept it as is, and I don't have to do anything else. This is completely entered in the system. It's a business expenditure, and it's under the app software web services category. Let's go to the next one. We have Florida Blue, which is health insurance. So let's say this is not business, this is personal. All I have to do is click on personal. So after I click on personal, this is going to go into a category called personal spending. I really don't have to do anything at this point because you really don't have to bother categorizing transactions that are personal, right? Because if they're personal in nature, they have nothing to do with the business, which is what QuickBooks Online really is focused on. So we have this one called Chase Ending In. That's actually a payment to the credit card. So I'm just going to click in business, and it automatically knew that it was a transfer. Again, this is not always going to be right. I mean, this is what it guessed to be. If it's something else, if it's wrong, you can actually click on it and edit it. Let's take a look at the next one, Costco. Okay, so let's say this one is a business expense. I'm going to click in business, and it send it into other business expenses. Now, let's talk about creating some rules. So I'm going to click on add rule, and I'm going to say that when I go to Costco, it's going to be office supplies. So I'm going to click on add rule. And then it says here, hey, when the description is Costco, should it match exactly? I'm going to say no, just in case it has the word Costco or maybe the store number next to it or something like that. Under account, I can choose the source account. So I can specifically say if Costco is being spent from a particular bank account or from a particular credit card account, use this rule. However, if it's for all the accounts, you're going to leave that under select, which basically means that it applies to all the bank accounts. And then we also said that it's going to be automatically business. And then the category, it's other business expenses. So I'm going to click on that. And then I'm going to type here office supplies. Perfect. So now I change the category to office supplies. And then I click on save. Now there's a little button here that says also apply to past transactions. That could be good if you wanted to retroactively reclassify some transactions that were entered already. So I'm going to go ahead and click on save. And you will notice that Costco is automatically reclassified by a rule. And the rule says that it's going to be under business and office supplies. And I can actually click on edit rule and change it if I want it at that point. So it's actually a pretty simple process. You're just there to classify whether something is business or personal and give it a category. Okay, let's say this Costco that's over here. I'm going to click on business. And notice that when I click on business, it automatically puts it in office supplies. Why? Because that was the exact same category I used before when I created the rule for Costco. Now, if I click on this rule business, I'm going to click on edit rule. I'm going to click on also apply to past transactions and click on save. And then I no longer have to actually give Costco a category, it would automatically reclassify based on rule. So actually a really important trick about this is whether a rule is really based for transactions now and in the future, or will it also retroactively go back and do those. Now let's take a look at this one, check 1702. Now check numbers are never going to come in with a vendor name or with a payee name because QuickBooks doesn't know that. It can't read that from the bank. So you actually have to give this a category. So I'm going to click in business, and then it automatically guesses that it's rent or lease. Obviously that's, well, it could be right, but it happens to not be right. So I wanted to change that. I'm going to go ahead and click on rent and lease. So as I click on rent and lease, it gives me a whole bunch of categories I can pick from here. So I can actually search, let's say this was business insurance. So I can search for insurance, and then I'm going to have a couple of options for insurance. I can just select business insurance, and there it is. It will select business insurance for me. Now, if I click on the 1702 specifically, I can change the payee and put here Progressive, or whatever the vendor's name is supposed to be. Now this information, let me zoom in again. This information would come from the actual check number the actual check image that I'm looking at from maybe my online banking or a physical copy of the check that I may have with me. Again, QuickBooks cannot download the payee names on written checks, so you're gonna have to write those yourself. Okay, the next one is we have some income coming in. So I have some income coming in from Shopify, income coming in from Intuit Solutions credit card processing. So I can just select business. Business, it actually is categorizing it as transfer. So if that's wrong, I'm going to click on transfer and change that to income. So I'm going to put here income and select income there. And then this one is selected income. This one's actually correct. So that's good. And there's all my transactions that have been selected. So I can actually select all of them in batch if I wanted to. Okay, by just clicking all of them together, I can in batch mark them all as business, and all of these are already business with the exception of this one. So I could just basically change them all in one shot. So if I click on mark as business, you're gonna see this one Florida blue be changed automatically. Maybe I want to do that, maybe I don't want to do that, or I can select them all. And also change the category in batch if I want to, which is obviously not a good idea. I was just kind of showing you that process. I'm going to keep going and classify some of these. I'm going to accept some of these categories the way they are. So I'm just going to mark this business, business, business. I'm going to mark them as business based on what they are. If a personal one shows up, okay, there's this one called transfer. I'm going to change that one to income, because that's not really a transfer. And that's really a real common question that I have, is people say, when do we actually use that option called transfer? Well, you only really use transfer when you're transferring money from one bank account to the other, or when you're transferring money from a bank account to pay off a credit card or to pay off a loan or something like that. But if it's actually an expenditure, it needs to go as business or personal and the category. And if it's actual income, it needs to go as business and personal and then the category. So this one's personal. I'll click personal here. Business, business, business. If any of them I don't like the category, like this one, I'm going to click on it and change that to office supplies. And that's really different ways of working. Like some folks like to click on each one and select the category for each one. And some folks like to create rules. Like for example, Amazon, I do Amazon quite a bit. So maybe I should create a rule for Amazon. So I'm going to click on add rule, and I'm going to make this office supplies, click on also apply to past transactions, click on save. And then you're going to notice, let me click on that again, click on save. And you're going to notice that a whole bunch of Amazon transactions that come in the future. Let's see when we have the next one coming in. And there it is. There's another one there, automatically reclassified by the rule. So that's actually the cool thing about the rules, is that you're basically telling QuickBooks Self-Employed how do you want it to behave automatically. And it's actually not bad when you do one by one. It's actually not that bad. Let me see. This was actually a transfer. This one's actually right, because that's a transfer to another bank account. So that's right. So it's actually not that bad. You selecting the categories. We'll do business here. And business, income. So it's actually not that bad. As you go through it, you will be incredibly surprised on how good these categorizations are. Now, again, QuickBooks doesn't really know whether it's business or personal. So that's really the time that you have to tell it what it is. So let's say this one, for example, happens to be rent. So I'm going to put here my landlord name and change that to rent. And again, like, don't think that QuickBooks Online is going to be good at guessing your written checks. That's absolutely not going to happen, just because there's no vendor names on it. But as you go in there and you classify business and personal, you will start noticing that it will actually start telling you, hey, wait a second, I start seeing a pattern. It looks like you're classifying the same thing over and over. Would you like to do this more often, or use the same rule more often? Or maybe you should create a rule for it, which is actually true. I should do that. So for this Shopify, let me add a rule and make that business and make that income, not transfer. So let me change that to income, and then click also apply to pass and click on save. And then you start seeing how many transactions get automatically categorized with that rule. So you start going down the list there, and you start seeing in blue the ones that have been categorized automatically, and that would be a lot less clicks. And then basically in the long run, as you use QuickBooks Online Self-Employed, there really isn't that much additional work you will be doing, because everything will be done for you automatically between the rules and the artificial intelligence selecting categories for you. I'm going to do a couple more because I want to make sure that we have a nice report with a lot of information, so we can then dissect that. So I'm going to do all of March here. I'm going to select them all as business, and I'm kind of watching for these categories as they come in. And this one's insurance, so that's progressive. And again, the reason I knew that was because I'm looking at the actual check in front of me. Okay, so I'm going to keep categorizing. And you're always watching for that category. Make sure that category is right. For example, this one in Disney was personal. So let me change that one to personal. Perfect. This personal withdrawal, let me change that one to personal. And just keep on going. See, the some biz, commission and fees, that's not right. That's actually a business license and permit. So let me see if we have anything on their business licenses. We do. Perfect. That's great. Okay. And you just go down the list. Okay. And I usually accept when it is telling you to create categories. It's basically telling you that it's watching for those patterns. So I'm going to keep going. I want to make this one personal. Keep going down the list. Like this one, Ring Central, that's telephone. So I'm going to change that from utilities to telephone. You see, it looks like they don't have a telephone. So I'm gonna settle with utilities. That's fine. And I'm going to keep selecting these categories. And this one's actually personal. And as you notice, it actually becomes pretty easy, especially when these categories start being selected on their own. The only one that are really going to be tricky, again, is the checks and any transfers. So transfers are always going to be tricky. And, you know, every business will vary. Like, I won't lie to you to tell you it's hard. Like, you have to look at every circumstance and decide, hey, is this a transfer? Is this income? It all depends on how the money flow goes. Like this one for PayPal, for example, I'm going to call this one income because I'm not going to link my PayPal account. So every time the money comes in from my PayPal, I'm going to call it income. But if I actually was linking my PayPal account, then the money from the PayPal to my bank would actually be a transfer. So again, that's when it gets really, really hairy with all these potential details of the transactions. And again, it almost takes, it may take an accountant to kind of look at the situation and tell you, but you'll be able to do 90-80% of the work on your own by just simply selecting this is business, this is personal, all that stuff. Okay, so I finished all of March, so I have a complete month. And now I'm going to go back into home. And then I'm going to see my profit and loss. So we see my profit and loss, income minus expenses. We see all the money that came in during the year. We see all the expenses that came out. We get to see here in the dashboard all the top expenses. We can group these based on the month. We can do it by last month, right? Depending on which month I have expenses on. So it's actually pretty neat. Here on the right side, it tells you how much cash there is on the bank accounts, how much you owe on the credit cards. And these are the connected bank accounts. Of course, if you don't have any connected bank accounts, you may have to enter that information manually. Okay, so that's the banking, which is actually one of the most essential pieces of it. Let's talk about invoicing. So let's say I want to send an invoice to a couple of my customers. So I'm going to click on Invoices here on the, let me zoom this in. I'm going to click on Invoices on the left side of the screen, and then I'm going to click on Create Invoice. I'm going to zoom out a little bit more. Perfect. And then here on the right side is asking you to fill out an application to be able to do payments. Here on the bottom where it says set up payments, you don't have to do that, but if you do want to be able to receive electronic payments, you have to go through that application process. In the top, you have information like the logo of your business, your name, your address, all that stuff. I'm going to go ahead and click on save and deal with that information later. On the left side, I'm going to put the name of my client, the one that I'm doing work for. So let's say I'm doing information for Maria Gomez. So I'm going to put her name there, and then I'll put her email, maria@gmail.com. That's not really her email, but just making it up. Then there's a little drop down here that says client info. I can put their address, so I can have that stuff in the invoice as well. Invoice number, I can manually change the invoice if I want to. I can select the date of the invoice. So let's say this invoice was done on March 20th and then it's due on March 31st. So I'm giving her a couple of days to pay. Then here on the add work button, that's when you describe the type of work that you're doing. So I'm going to go to add work, and I'm going to call this business consulting services, right? Whatever it is that you're doing, that you do for a living, right? Business consulting services. You can pick whether you're charging by the hour, a flat rate, or by item. I'm going to go ahead and click on by the hour, and let's say I charged her for 4 hours at $200 each one. So the total, once I click on add invoice, should be 800, and there we go. If you wanted to add one more line, I'm going to click on add work, and I'm going to do by the item, and then I'm going to say that I'm going to get reimbursed maybe for parking. Right, so I'm going to put here parking reimbursement, and then I'll put here $20 and click on add to invoice, and there you go. So there's my invoice for $820. I'm going to click on send invoice, and then maria@gmail.com is going to get that invoice. So I'm going to click on send invoice, and that's it. So once I click on the invoice button on the left side, I can always come back here and mark it as paid once the payment comes in. There's a little drop down menu under action that allows me to view it, edit it, duplicate it, export it as PDF, which is actually really useful if you're gonna maybe email it again through your own email software or something like that. You can print it, you can resend it, and you can delete it. Once they pay you, you click on mark as paid, and that's it. It's done. So now you have tracking of how many invoices are open and which ones have been paid. Now through QuickBooks Self-Employed, because it's not truly an accounting software, you don't actually have to receive the payment and match it with your bank. That's something that you would do with QuickBooks Online, with the regular version of QuickBooks Online. With QuickBooks Self-Employed, the invoices are literally just there as a tracking mechanism. They really don't become an accounting mechanism per se. So I'm going to go ahead and click on reports, and then I'm going to click on the profit and loss report. I can pick if I want a month in particular, a custom date. I'm going to put here this month, and then click on view. There's also a drop down if I want to download it into a digital format. I'm just going to click on view, and then we're going to allow QuickBooks Self-Employed to create my profit and loss report. There's all my business income. There's all my expenses and categories. This is essentially what you're going to give to the accounting professional so they can prepare your taxes afterwards, or you will be using TurboTax to prepare your own tax returns. It will be based on this information. Let me click on back. I'm going to click on tax summary now and click on view. And this will give you the information about the business profit. It will give you what you spent versus how much of it is deductible. And there's different rules based on different expenditures. You should probably talk to your accounting professional about that. For example, meals gets cut in half, right? That's just one of the cookie rules about taxes, that you can only take half of your business meals. So that just gives you an idea more or less of what, even though you spent it, you only get to deduct that piece that's on the right side. So that's the tax summary. I'm going to click on back, and then I'm going to go to the tax detail. It's actually pretty cool. What it does is when you click on download, it will create an Excel document. I'm going to double click on that. That will contain all the expenditures. And let me minimize this window here so we can look at our Excel spreadsheet. There it is. So it will show me all of the expenditures in an Excel document. So maybe you want to send this to someone via Excel, and accountants love this, right? Because they like to see things in Excel. And what's really awesome about this is not just a summary. You can actually get a quarterly breakdown. You can get details on every single one of the categories exported to Excel. Your accountant will love this because they'll be able to really know exactly what's going on, to see if maybe you classified something incorrectly, or maybe they can look at the details to see if you classified it well, or maybe you misclassified it. All that stuff becomes really, really important and relevant at tax time. Also, if you cancel your QuickBooks Self-Employed subscription, you always have this spreadsheet as your sort of permanent work document in which you use to prepare your tax return. So that's the 3 reports in a nutshell: profit and loss, tax summary, and tax details. Now, once I click on the taxes tab here on the left side, it will actually start calculating my quarterly estimated payments. Now, right now, it's not estimating any quarterly payments because my income is projected to be negative. Now, it could be all sorts of things, why the income is being predicted like that. There's actually a read more button you can press, and it'll take you to a page in which they can explain to you how they calculate this. Again, I wouldn't count on this 100%. I would definitely talk to an accounting professional to make sure that you are paying the correct amount of tax. Now, once I click on that little triangle left to the Q1 button, you get to see the details in which where they're getting the information from. Your profit, your income, and your deductions. And there is a projection factor coming into here. So this is never going to be an exact science. Of course, I haven't finished all the accounting, so you're not going to have all the information. I may have to go back into transactions and make sure that I finish entering all the transactions that I haven't entered. Maybe if I take some of these big expenditures out and I make these personal, let me show you. This is going to be pretty cool. So I'm going to take some of these things and mark them personal. I'm going to take some of these big expenditures, mark them personal. And what I'm essentially doing is, because I'm calling all these things personal, I'm going to call this one income. I'm going to increase my income now, and now I'm going to have a profit, and you're going to see how that, I call this one personal. And I'm going to go back and look at my tax information. So I notice that now it's actually calculating a tax payment. Why? Because the net result is actually turning out to be a positive number. So again, we'll repeat this again. It's just an estimate, but it's actually pretty neat that you start seeing it live, as you start getting income and starting getting more profits. Also, assuming that I go to transactions and I do everything that's in here, of course. I have to enter everything. I can't just do 1 month or misclassify things. Anything that's personal will not be a deduction. So that's going to increase your tax liability. So it's pretty cool. Now let me go into miles on the left hand side, and I'm going to go ahead and configure my car. Now there's this feature called turn on auto tracking that basically you put your cell phone number and then you download the app on the phone, and you can actually turn on the automatic mileage tracker as long as you have location turned on your phone. And QuickBooks, the app on your phone, will ask you, hey, is this a business or a personal mile? And then it will transfer all that mileage over to QuickBooks Self-Employed. Now you can also just skip that if you don't want to do that, and you can click on add trip manually. You can add here your business miles. So I can actually put in here that back on the 8th, I drove 500 miles for business, and this was, let's call it Orlando Convention, whatever I want to call it. Okay. And then I'm going to click on save. And there it is. I put my 500 miles and it automatically tells you that based on the current mileage rate, you will get a deduction of $272.50. There's the rate per mile on the right side, just in case you're wondering how that works. So you can keep manually entering the trip details by just doing one by one the way I just did it. You can synchronize an app called Mile IQ, which is a very popular app to track your miles. So you can import that data, or you can use the actual QuickBooks app for your phone. Now I want to go back to transactions for a second and show you one more thing. All of these expenditures that we brought in from the bank that we categorize, we can also click on this little tiny hidden triangle on the right side, and it will open it up and it allow me to do a couple of things. One, I can click on exclude transaction if it happened to be a duplicate of some sort, so I can completely get rid of it because I don't want to see it in my accounting, so that's possible. Two, I can add more notes, so I can put here, this was the software we bought this month for consulting, whatever, right? So you can actually come in here and add any notes you want, assuming that's going to be relevant. But the really cool thing here is that receipt option. So I can actually drag and drop something from my computer, or I can click on browse if I happen to already have it saved in my computer somewhere. I'm going to select my receipt, click on choose, and that is going to upload the document into QuickBooks Online Self-Employed. So then I can just pretty much delete that receipt. I don't need to have it anymore because now it's going to be in my permanent record online. I could always print it and look at it, and that could be my permanent record. Okay, let's move on to the phone app, which is pretty exciting. So I already downloaded the phone app in my phone. I'm going to go ahead and open the QuickBooks Self-Employed app. And the first thing I'm going to see is the dashboard that gives me all my expenditures, profit, estimated taxes, bank balance, all of that stuff. I'm going to click on transactions, which is the first button on the bottom bar down here. And I get to choose how do I want to categorize these transactions. So for example, there's this one called QuickBooks, which I bought some software from QuickBooks. So if I swipe to the left and let go, it will automatically categorize it as whatever the category by default for that vendor is. USPS, same thing. I'm going to swipe to the left, and I can actually click on it if I want to, and then change the category. If that happens to be advertising, it will go to that rule, and then it will automatically classify. Let's say this one is a personal expenditure. All I have to do is swipe to the right, and it automatically goes into personal. I don't have to do anything else at that point. If you don't want to swipe, you can just press it, and it will open the transaction, and then you can have both choices, business, personal, or split. Or you can add an attachment if you want to. So I'm going to call this business, and I can change the category from gas and fuel if I want to something else, but I can just leave it there on gas and fuel, and that's it. If I wanted to take a picture of the receipt, I would click on add receipt, and I would click on take photo. Take a picture of the receipt. It's just a piece of paper. When I click on the button there, it will take a picture. Click on use this photo, and it will add the attachment into this specific transaction. I'm going to go ahead and click on save. And that's one other way to enter transactions. So all these expenses came in through my bank and credit card that I already connected to QuickBooks. Now you can also enter cash expenditures by clicking on the top right. There's a little plus button. So if this happens to be a business spending, and I paid, let's say, I went to some restaurant and I paid cash, and I'm going to call this meals and entertainment. And I put the amount, let's say it was $18. And that would basically create the cash expenditure because that didn't come out of my bank account. So I would have to do that by hand in there. Now I could also click on attach receipt and take a picture of the receipt and add it there for my records, which will be very good to do. I can click on save, and that's one way to enter the transaction, by entering everything by hand. Now another way you can do it is you can click on the bottom right. There's a little green button there that has a little camera and a picture. And you can use that to take an actual picture of a receipt. Now, I don't have a receipt with me, so I'm going to take a picture of this blank paper. And what QuickBooks will do is it will try to use, it will actually read the information from the receipt and try to figure out what it is. It usually takes 2 days anyway to do it. And the reason why it takes 2 days is because it wants to check to see if it will match your bank or your credit card statement. It usually takes 2 to 3 days for a credit card receipt to match the statement. So that information doesn't come in right away. It will match it. And then if QuickBooks can match it with a transaction, it will let you know, hey, I matched that receipt with this expenditure. And if it can't match it, it will ask you what to do with it. And then at that point, you will give it the category, the dollar amount, whatever you want. Now I can click on the reviewed button on the top of the screen, and it will show me all the transactions that I already have accepted. Now I may have accepted this through the web application, or I may have accepted it through the phone. It really doesn't matter. Everything that I have accepted that came into the bank and categorized is going to show up in here. If I wanted to recategorize something, I would click on that, change the category. I can change it from other business expenses to advertising, click on save, and done. It's actually really, really easy. Now mileage, I'm going to click on the mileage button, and I can do a couple of things. I can enable or disable auto tracking, which basically is going to use my GPS functionality in my phone to figure out when I'm stopping and going on my phone, and then based on that, it will decide on whether or not there's a trip. It will ask you, is this a business or a personal trip? And at that point, you will let it know. Or you can click on the plus button and you can create your own trip. So let's say on March 19th, I drove 300 miles, let's say to Tampa. I call it accounting show, whatever. Okay, and then I click on accept, and I click on save, and it will add the mileage and the deduction into my accounting. I can click on invoice, and I can create an invoice if I want to, and click on the plus sign. I can create a new recipient. Let's say I'm going to sell this to Joe Woods. Click on save. I can click on done. Put his email, joe@gmail.com, because it's going to email Joe the invoice. I can now click on add invoice item. I can type a new thing like quick phone consultation. Click on save, select dollar amount, $500. Click on add, click on send invoice, send. Now Joe has my invoice. At that point, maybe he pays me cash, maybe he sends me a check, maybe he pays me digitally. If I enable the digital payments through here, I click on the invoice, I click on mark as paid, and we'll be done. And then we have taxes, where we can choose whether we want to look at the annual tax report or the quarterly estimated taxes. If it happens to be any taxes due, all that information would be there. I can click on the gear button and also change all my settings in terms of my banks that are connected. I can mess with the rules. Remember, we created some of the rules on the application that was web-based, but I can click on the plus sign and create my own rules. So the information that comes from the bank gets automatically categorized. And a couple other settings like your tax profile and your vehicle settings can also be changed from there. So the phone app itself, in my opinion, is the most exciting part of this whole thing. So I think I wanted to show that as well. So you see the whole dynamic of using the phone and the web application for QuickBooks Self-Employed. So finally, what do I think about this whole thing? QuickBooks Self-Employed is technically not an accounting software. I don't think I know a whole bunch of accountants that are going to love this software right off the bat. One of my major issues is that it doesn't have a balance sheet, and corporations formally, or LLCs or corporations, formally have to have a full profit and loss and balance sheet in order to have a complete set of financial statements. Self-employed is not really meant to do that. It's meant to ignore standard accounting customs, and is supposed to be used for folks that just want to keep simple tracking of their expenses, of their income, their mileage, and that sort of thing, and maybe do some of their own taxes with it. Now, again, if you have a formal corporation, an LLC, S corporation, C corporation, that's going to have to file a separate tax return than the personal tax return, then you want to stick with QuickBooks Online, and that's usually called QuickBooks Online Simple Start, Essentials, or Plus. I have a link in the description below that explains how to use that software, and it's very, very different. If you are a self-employed individual, a person having money on the side on top of a job and wants to keep track of those expenditures, I like QuickBooks Self-Employed very much, and it's $10 a month as of the date of this video. Can't beat it. If you use the link quickbooksse.com, you get 50% off for the first year. There's also a discount for QuickBooks Online, by the way. Click on the link on the description below if you want to check that out. So at the end of the day, it's really up to you. I mean, if you watch this whole 45-minute video, is because you're interested, because you started using it. It's better than doing nothing, I think. I'm a bigger fan of QuickBooks, the regular version, the desktop or the online, not the self-employed. But this sure beats doing things by hand or a spreadsheet. And for $10 a month, if you can keep tabs of your expenses and income, I think it's a wonderful thing. So try the software. If you love it, put your credit card, pay the monthly fee, and hopefully you have a pleasant experience at tax time to do your taxes and your financial reporting at the end of the year. I hope you liked this video. Hit like if you did, subscribe to the channel, put some notes below in terms of what do you think it was missing, what are the videos you would like to see on this subject matter. Thanks.